Excellent. Thank you all for showing up. And welcome to the 2025 Experimental Lecture. I am Jessica Bardsley, Assistant Professor of Experimental Film and Media here in the Department of Undergraduate Film and Television in NYU. And the Experimental Lecture Series is supported both by UGF-TV and Cinema Studies. And before we get started, I just want to thank a few people, Dana Poland and Lynne Sachs, who have supported this event, the chairs of both of those departments. I also want to thank our various collaborators who have helped to make tonight possible. Some of these folks are here. So this includes Alice Benavides, James Richards, Kayla Tyson, Allison Andreas, Emily Bergman. We also have student workers, David Choi, Jason Mendoza, Hector Valentine. I also want to thank Daryl Wilson and Vito Adriances. I'm working on it. And Dan Strebel. But yes, I'm really happy to see you all here. And, including students, faculty, members of the experimental film community. But we're here tonight to celebrate Lynne's work, so I'm really glad to have you. So Lynne Sachs, some of you know this, but Lynne Sachs is actually the one who began programming the annual experimental lecture series at NYU Tisch in 2008. She did this in collaboration with professors Jonathan Kahana and Dan Strebel, and Lynne curated and promoted this series over 13 lectures that spanned 17 years. With the support of Cinema Studies and Undergraduate Film and Television, Lynne invited experimental filmmakers, some of whom are here. If you are here and I call your name, if you can give us a wave, that would be great. So folks including Peggy Ahwesh, Baldwin, Abigail Child, Cramer Jack Waters, Nick Dorsky, Bradley Eros, Ernie Gehr, Barbara Hammer, Ken Jacobs, Jonas Mekas, Carolee Schneemann, and Serra. And she brought these folks, did I leave anyone out? I think that's everyone. So she brought everyone here to talk about their lives making experimental films. And when Lynne Sachs taught here at NYU, she had this vision to create a series that would invite experimental filmmakers to give a lecture that was itself an experiment. So that's the assignment, yeah. As Lynne writes, quote, "From the beginning, I imagined this talk to be one in which someone who had immersed themselves in the world of alternative experimental film would reveal something about the process of making their work by visiting pieces that were either unfinished, unresolved, bewitching, or even untouchable. The intention was to lay bare the challenges rather than the successes, the gnawing, ecstatic reality of the work of making art." The Experimental Lecture Series has brought these important film artists from the field of experimental film to NYU to give these lectures that address their films and processes of filmmaking. So this year, we invited Lynne herself to lay bare her own film practice, both to honor her cinematic work, but also, importantly, her years of work uplifting the work of others through this very lecture series. So over the last 4 decades, Lynne Sachs has created cinematic works that define genre through the use of hybrid forms and cross-disciplinary collaboration, incorporating elements of the essay film, documentary, performance, and collage. Her films and poems explore the intricate relationship between personal observations and broader historical experiences. Working from a feminist perspective, she investigates connections between the body, the camera, and the materiality of film itself. She uses letters, archives, diaries, poetry, and music to take us on a critical journey through reality and memory. Her work has been featured around the world, both the Thomas Edison Film Festival and Prismatic Ground Film Festival, recognized her with a Lifetime Achievement Award in the experimental and documentary fields. Retrospectives of her work have been presented at the Museum of the Moving Image, the Sheffield Doc Fest, Buenos Aires Independent Festival of Independent Cinema, or International Festival of Independent Cinema, and more. So tonight in her experimental lecture entitled Choke, Chew, Savor, and Spit, The Messy Practice of Cinema, she will examine the making of a visceral cinema, one that does not know where it is going until it arrives, finds meaning in mistakes, and sets no boundaries between the real and the imagined. Through it all, she remains aware of the implicit connection between the body, the bodies, those she photographs, the camera, and the materiality of film itself. And without further ado, we will now begin. Let's give her a round of applause.
Film contains it all. I drink life, and its taste is in my mouth. My lecture is about the way it feels on my tongue, along the palate, along my throat. It's about that liminal space between speech and swallow. A lot can happen in the dark space between your lips. This is what happens to me. Choke, chew, savor, spit. And to our ears, the emphasis is like this. Stress, 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 unstress, stress. Making these films helped me cough it up. Not at home in a handkerchief, but in front of people. I would never have said these things, but I wanted to get them out, and film was the means that worked for me. I am 22 and caught in the fear of not knowing who I will become. I pick up a camera and start to look at myself as another, and almost me. I cast my childhood best friend, the person who has lived the closest to what I am, to be me. I animate her in my desire to animate myself. Film is not yet my life's work. It's just a vessel that can hold anything, and that is enough. I don't even get what it is to experiment yet. I embrace the idea that someone can become another in body, somatically, but not yet materially or formally. Now, looking back, I am the shadow, the follower, the ephemeral imprint.
I'm learning to read all over again, a face this time connected to a body. At first, I feel your story from within. Nose rubs against belly, elbow prods groin. Your silent cough becomes a confusing dip and bulge. You speak, and I struggle to translate. I lie on my side, talk to myself. Rub my fingers across my skin from left to right. I read out loud, and I hope you can hear me. I'm learning to read all over again, but this time I have a teacher.
Another way to grapple with what's coming in my own life. I am pregnant and very apprehensive. I dive into the story of Lilith, Adam's mate, the first woman, born from the earth, connected to the soil, her own being, before Eve, who will later emerge from his rib. Lilith wants to be on top in sex. She is desire. I spent 3 years in Lilith's cosmos, learning everything I can about Jewish mysticism during my pregnancy and my first months as a mother, elated and confused. How can it be that women in so many cultures are fearful of her? They even prepare amulets and incantation bowls to keep her away. I was writing poems that became the skeleton of the film. Just when I am on my way to becoming, my eyes open and you were there. Is Eden large enough for the two of us? Wherever I turn, there are branches pulling at my hair, earth between my toes and under my tongue. I slither and sometimes I use my wings. Let's slither together. Earth becomes dirt, becomes dirty. Bent knees turn into corners. Am I not right for this world? Before you, I did not know I was I. Now this I is part of my unbecoming.
I've never had any true relationships with men. My criteria for being a mother is having the stability to play that role fully. I don't think I could do that as a single mother. I just couldn't do it. I'm too ambitious and too eccentric and creative to give up who I am, what I've done with my life. But by doing that, I gave up the role of mother because I could not have done it alone.
I cast this woman, Cherie Wallace, as Lilith. She leads a very different life from my own. She dances, inhabits my imagination and my mythology. I try to work with her as an actor, but somehow I am caught up by her real story. It haunts me so much that I rip apart my film and let her life come inside. Her tale of letting go of her own child, her work as a lap dancer. I film her in close-up, thinking that this is a form of intimacy. Only when a film critic reviewing the film accuses me of revealing too much of her, in this case, her skin, of holding back her armor, literally her makeup, do I question my own assaultive behavior? In my fascination with her life on the margins, have I made her even more vulnerable? Failed her? I never see her again. A smile comes over your face. Lips flutter, flutter, quiver, turn up to touch cheek. I know, am told, have heard that in the dark, under your cradle, there in the empty space of dust between lies Lilith. I catch the reflection of my face in her eyes. I am a snake, a spider, the flame of a burning sword, a feather that tickles at the nape of your neck, broken glass and nakedness. Streams turn to pitch, soil into sulfur, land burns, night or day a pure dry thirst, vines twisting upward, gnarled and gray, soon become tomorrow's smoke. And still the hawk and the hog possess the dying tree. The owl and the raven drop down to lower branches. In the distance, nailed to a post, the words, "This begins the line of confusion. Call it no kingdom here." I start States of Unbelonging as a portrait of a filmmaker and mother killed with her 2 sons near the West Bank. I felt the horror in a personal way. This soon transforms into a meditation on war, land, the Bible, and filmmaking. I began writing letters to Gehr, a former student living in Tel Aviv, and we dig into the violence of the Middle East. Dear Gehr, I wanted to tell you about this article I read today in the Times that upset me so much. It was about a woman who reminded me of myself. She was an Israeli filmmaker, a teacher, a mother. She was killed on a kibbutz Metzer. People use the word terrorist act. All I know about that place is that it's near Jenin, a site of many killings of Palestinian citizens by Israeli military. This is a film about death. I want to turn away, but I can't. Do you ever have the feeling that the history you are experiencing has no shape? Even as a teenager, I was obsessed with history's shifts and ruptures. War helped us order time. A war established beginnings and endings. There is before, there is during, there is after. Without taking sides or casting blame, I embrace her story, and like a wave of recognizable horror, I enter her loss, her life. The difference between the peacefulness of the images you're sending me and the hostility simmering outside the frame is so apparent to me. Are you trying to protect me, Gehr? I've been reading the Bible incessantly, looking for those few phrases that might give credence to a landscape that makes normal people go mad. Bombs are exploding everywhere this afternoon. The sound is deafening, but I can't hear a thing. Israel, Istanbul, Iraq. Any shakeup on the surface of the earth dislodges my sense of equilibrium. A gust of wind, and I almost smell it.
If I buy a ticket at all, it will be within the next few days. Lynne.
Today is Tu B'Shvat, the birthday of the trees. An almond tree is blooming on Rothschild's Boulevard. It has white flowers and a really sweet smell. I think that the olive tree grows very slowly. It has a long history here in Israel. Some have been here since before the country was even established. It has a very unique trunk, like sculpture, the color of bronze. The branch itself is mentioned in the Bible. In the forest there are cypress and pine, and it seems as if They've been there forever, but in reality, they were planted by a foundation, the making of a forest, a nation established, the concept of a nation to stay, marking territory. My Bible teacher used to point to Jewish law. If a soldier needs to cut down an olive tree, he must have a permission from a very high-ranked officer in the army. In my head, I compare the status of a person and a tree. You don't need special permission to shoot someone if there is a threat, but you need a high authority to damage an olive tree. Olive is the color of the soldier's uniform.
My children were 4 and 5. They loved to hear the muezzin from the villages next to Metzo.
Some go through the bottom, others go over the top, or squeeze through the middle of the wall Israel's building to stop suicide bombers from getting into Jerusalem. So far, all the wall does, say the Palestinians of Abu Dis, where the wall cuts their village in half, is ruin their lives. Israel's plan is for a combined wall and fence to run about 350 miles around most of the West Bank. Patrolled by police jeeps, this part will run 38 miles near eastern Jerusalem with electronic sensors. Rauda Audi, who has breast cancer, must sneak through the wall to get to her clinic and to get to work. But it'll get worse. One day she won't even be able to do that.
They are torturing us. They are forcing us to hate them. And it is a very bad thing.
There has to be a better way than to split a village.
Eventually, the wall won't only split Abu Dis, and it won't only cut Palestinians off from Israel. Through large parts of the West Bank, it'll cut Palestinians off from Palestinians.
Abraham wanted a child so badly. He and his wife Serra were both 100 years old, and there didn't seem to be a chance. So Abraham decided to take matters into his own hands. He had a son with Hagar, the Egyptian maid. They named him Ishmael. Then miraculously, Serra too became pregnant and gave birth to Abraham's second son, Isaac. Serra was jealous of Hagar, whose son would always be able to lay claim to being Abraham's firstborn. So Abraham asked God to send Hagar and her baby boy to a far-off land. God said to Abraham, "I will make the son of the maidservant into a nation." Since his son had to go in the desert, he must have been really sort of mad.
Who was mad?
Abraham.
Abraham was mad?
Because his son had to go in the desert.
Yeah. And how do you think the brothers felt that they were separated?
How do you think?
I think they could have gotten along and lived in the same house together, even though they both had different mothers.
Did who sent him into the desert?
I feel haunted and retching. I made this film 20 years ago. That wall and the destruction overwhelmed me. Now I watch the assault on the Palestinian people in the West Bank and Gaza, and I think of Ishmael's sons and daughters sent to the desert again, and so much worse. At that point in my life, I didn't even know the word Nakba. I I sleep on the same mattress every night. My bed takes on the shape of my body. Like a fossil, I leave my mark. George Washington slept in many borrowed beds. He celebrated from one New England town to the next. George Washington slept here. But for some people, a bed is just a temporary place to sleep. An animal that borrows its home from another species is called an inquiline. I live in New York City, and I realize that there are so many things about it that I don't know. This film depicts the lives of 7 older Chinese immigrants sharing a shift bed apartment in Chinatown. Shift bed residents come and go day and night according to the demands of their working schedules. I conduct interviews. Huang, Ellen, Suet Lee, Linda, Che, and Sui tell me their stories. Then I realize I don't know how to work with the material. I feel awkward in a deep, convulsive way. I read over my translated texts and distill them into monologues you might find in a play. I ask my subjects to perform their own lives, and all at once we are making a movie together. Performance rescues me. But I also want to see how my collaborators will interpret their experiences through movement. They're so free with their bodies, even in front of audiences.
我個祖母呢，我稱呼佢做人人。我哋7歲嗰時呢，個鄉下個野蠻咁濃密，打爛咗我哋道門，毆打我同埋我人人，並且呢將我呢就綁起嚟，同人人2個人綁起嚟。咁咪搶走咗我哋全部家中嘅金錢同埋財富。咁呢，我哋屋企呢一無所有啦，冇嘢啦，乜都冇。咁啊，但係呢嗰種可怕嘅情形啊，我一想起嚟，我永遠不能忘記。我人人呢係一個裁縫師，又係一個魔術師。佢於是呢，用魔術想辦法解去咗我哋捆綁着我哋嘅繩子。於是呢，我哋2個呢可以豪生。從前我同人人2個人一齊呢向一張個床墊呢瞓覺。我哋2個人呢有一個固定個床位，佢呢就瞓左邊，我呢就瞓右邊。咁我呢逐漸咗長大咗，佢呢就逐漸咗就縮細咗。咁我一想呢，我哋摸一摸呢，我就知道呢床前個位置咯。咁樣。當我呢12歲嗰時生日，佢呢俾我一個呢正熟嘅雞蛋，好大件事咯。俾我爺一個正熟嘅雞蛋，佢好開心㗎，對我講話。佢話呢從今日起，我哋可以換床位。咁呢我哋瞓大個床印，佢哋呢瞓細個床印。咁啊，當我呢14歲嘅時候，嗰張床墊呢成為我自己所有啦。但係我仍然呢喜歡瞓我細個床印嗰一邊。
Now, 10 years later, I still wonder, who was I to ask them to open up their lives? I was upset about the results of the 2016 election. Like thousands of other distraught people, I attended the Women's March. Afterwards, I listened to my 7-year-old neighbor.
So what do you think women were maybe unhappy about, and why were they marching?
Well, because they want the same things as men. They want to be able to do the same things as men, and they want to, okay. It used to happen with voting.
Mm-hmm. Like what happened with voting?
Women weren't allowed to vote. I think the men would go out to vote and the women would just be stuck doing other stuff. And then we made our signs.
Tell me about that.
I think I wrote women's rights on it. Yeah, I drew the American flag, but other than that, I'm not sure what I drew.
Yeah. Do you still have your sign?
Well, me and Mommy lost it on the way there, but I think we still have Mommy's sign somewhere. It was kind of weird because when the yelling started, it was all just really quiet, and then someone would say something, and then after that, the people would repeat, and then it kept on going on, and then at some point it stopped. I think one of them would, at some point, someone started, we want equal, something like we want equal rights. Something like that. Well, I don't really know how I felt. It was a bunch of mixed feelings that I couldn't really make out. Happy and excited, and maybe just a little tiny bit scared.
I was home during shelter in place when I asked my daughter Noah to examine miscellaneous objects from my life. Here, there, all at once, child and adult temporal inversions. Inside this terrifying middle, eating slow dinners slowly, warm bread, just right fruit, delivered by a woman with her own daughters sleeping in their own beds, revisiting each day of an opening act. March 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, Friday the 13th. Where I was intending to be and where I was. 56 days in captivity so far. When to stay and when to go. Pages I've read as a measure of time, almonds eaten, cleaning surfaces, cleaning again, bleach and more bleach again. Masks to wear or not to wear, to protect me, to protect you. Anger at DT, anger at the mayor, watching Tiger King and flattening the curve, social distancing and comorbidity, pod and PPE. Before, I would walk from A, call it home, to B, then to C and D, all the way to Z. Stop and stop again in a zig, back in a zag, a diagonal, a curve. I used my feet, rode on elevators, shook hands, hugged. You too remember the long ago here. Ruthless flossing, fighting about something that happened 6 years ago, caring about everything, knowing that only one thing matters, dreaming like a film like a dream, 76 days in captivity and counting. My reaction to January 6, 2021. Between 1984 and 2019, I shoot 8 and 16 millimeter film, videotape, and digital images with my father. It's the hardest but most constant thing I have ever done in my life as an artist. I use every camera available to me, from Super 8 to cell phone, and everything in between, but I can't stand to look at what I've collected. Then I decide to finish it, which means I need to watch and listen to everything. A dear friend advises me to wait until he has died, but I don't. The images in this clip are like skin, worn by the years. Now all that is left is black and white. The technology, the cameras, changed over and over again, but my subject was always the same. I pretended I was seeing all that was there, but ultimately I always knew nothing was really what it seemed. The scene is one of my favorites from all of my films. It's the distillation I carry in me that he has died. Now that he has died, it no longer makes me choke. I started programming the annual experimental lecture series at NYU in 2008, as you know. With the support of the Cinema Studies and Undergraduate Film departments, I invited Peggy Ahwesh, who's here, Craig Baldwin, Abigail Child, who's here, Peter Cramer and Jack Waters, and they're here, Nick Dorsky, Bradley Eros, who's here, Sue Friedrich, who wrote me she couldn't come, Ernie Gehr, Barbara Hammer, Ken Jacobs, who also wrote me that he couldn't come, Jonas Mekas, Carolee Schneemann, and Serra, who's teaching tonight, to talk about their lives making alternative experimental films. Barbara, Carolee, and Jonas have all died, and I think of them and their experimental lectures in this building very often. In these films, I grapple with ideas that take another kind of thinking. Structure is everything, and finding the visual language that is specific to the project is part of my method. Each film requires a different strategy. Sometimes I'm reluctant to assert myself. I collide so much with doubt. I am more interested in the subtext than the text. I realize that anyone involved in the making of a project, like my daughters or a good friend or someone I have simply met, is also somehow a collaborator I might need to listen to. I am 17 years old, living in Memphis, Tennessee, when I see Reverend L.O. Taylor's 16mm films of Black urban life. 8 years later, I return to my hometown to reconnect with this city in a new way, though through his images and by talking to the people who knew him. I spent 2 months walking around neighborhoods I barely know. I ask questions about Taylor. This is my first brush with making a film about a person's life outside my own. In the 1930s and 40s, Taylor built a fiery reputation for lacing his sermons with parables and fables. I had to imagine those, but he was also a filmmaker who carried the same Bolex camera that I was using then and still use today. Taylor is the first filmmaker I truly admired. He shot from the inside out, a minister filming his own community with the intention of screening these films for the people who were in them. But in making my film on his life, I have to deal with my own presence as a white person. A teacher's of mine suggests I put my face in the film. I resist.
We'd always have advertising early in the morning. That was part of our activity at Pilgrim Church, which is the church Reverend Taylor from the pastor. Minister would go down, they take a long stick and wade out into the water. Really, the Spirit of the Lord would come down, and they just wouldn't have no control. People, Spirit of the Lord is on them. They have strength that ordinarily you just don't have. They go down, they sing on the river, on the water site. They sang old spirituals, and you talking about a hallelujah time. People get happy and they get to shouting and be shouting on the banks of the river just like people do in church.
Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus.
Again, I'm looking for a way to speak about the atrocities of war. Is there any language that can do this? I watch a class of Latin scholars grappling with the nuanced task of translation. Cadaver, lost loved ones, lamentation. From 1994 to 2010, I made 6 different films that made me think about war and its aftermath. I created a talk like this one, which I called I Am Not a War Photographer. With this film, I embraced Walter Benjamin's essay, The Task of the Translator, as a way to recognize the weight that comes with the responsibility of the messenger, the delivery of sadness.
Dente, maybe? Aqua ex vistu, something like that? Yeah, I like that. Aqua, what was that again? Aqua, I probably want to sandwich it right. Aqua ex vistuis. Yeah, it's a technical term to sandwich. Ex vistuis. Ex vistuis. Or maybe make it singular. It's kind of more poignant if it's singular, don't you think? Ex vistula, I don't know why. So the water flowing. Effundente, so water flowing from the pipe. You like that from open water faucets? I like that. Effundente. Okay. and the stunned grief of a few women. So with this water, we have an apple of absinthe. With the stunned grief, well, let's add atoniton. Do you want that for stunned, shocked? So to wash away, maybe the past is the death. To wash away the bitterness of the death would be a way of making it intelligible. From the body of a 20-year-old school teacher from Baghdad. There's a beautiful rhythm there, the body of a 20-year-old school teacher from Baghdad. The journalist style here, who is Nila Banerjee, is very accumulative. So far we've had the large white room, the open water faucet, stunned grief, bitter past. She's using a lot of adjectives. So there's something a little melancholy about where the air was damp. Let's just start with where the air was damp, and then we'll figure out from open water faucets and the stunned grief of a few women. We have Myror and Luctus and Aigritudo. I think Aigritudo is very bitter as a kind of grief. So do we want that bitterness here? Or do we want a more basic grief? Do we want to say, I think we want the bitterness in here somewhere, but maybe do we want to hold that off till later in the passage, or do we want it up front? I think we should, because it comes up again. So go and then look to some, and so we'll use.
Can we maybe substitute something like lament, or like the physical action of lamentation instead of a word for grief?
Yeah, I think that would be good. But these women, I mean, obviously they're going to be bitter because they've lost their loved ones in such a horrible way.
There was too much sugar in me and I was scared. The glucose numbers were getting higher. I turned to the data of my body and my mind and tried to parse it all out. I made this film with playwright Lizzie Olesker. We created live performances in New York City laundromats as a way to explore the experiences of the people who work there. Around the same time, I wrote a collaborative essay titled English is Spoken Here, English is Broken Here. I asked myself what it means when we privilege one language and allow the others to drown. Since we were working with Spanish and Chinese-speaking people, we pondered this conundrum as a part of the texture of our film. Language uses translation to make poetry.
Te pueden atrapar si te ven. Dejé a mi familia allá atrás. No tuve alternativa. Porque era peligroso. Teníamos hambre. A veces. Hubo una época que teníamos de sobra. Papaya, palcha, tamarindo. Ni siquiera sé cómo se llama. Ni siquiera sé cómo se dice quenepa. Recuerdo el sabor, pero no sé cómo se llama. Cuando me marché, ellos eran muy pequeños. Cuando al fin llegaron, eran mucho mayores. Cuando vinieron, lloré.
而家好彩有工做。
La paga no es muy buena, no es suficiente. Salario mínimo. ¿Eso es una broma? Usualmente no pienso en eso. Ya no. Ahora viven conmigo, mis hijos. Han crecido acá y ahora son muy distintos a mí y de la forma que crecí. Son míos, pero muy distintos a mí. No cámara, por favor. Nada que decir.
Another distillation. The close-up on lint encapsulates everything in the film as a whole. Lint is skin, lint is clothing, lint is who we are and how we present ourselves. Savor. It's different from the other words in some fundamental ways. It's two syllables that come together with an initial punch and then a release. Stress, unstress. There is an oral narrative that culminates with a form of pleasure experienced in the articulation of the word, or in this case, the making of a film. My great uncle gave me a little amateur film camera, a wind-up 8mm. He explained the way you process it. I decided to subvert it and wondered how it would come out. This could be the place for me to explore gender with my boyfriend on the rooftop of the San Francisco Art Institute. I was thinking about the renowned article by Laura Mulvey and the male gaze. I had probably just read it in class. I was steeped in theory at the time. I told him not to look through the lens, to shoot from the hip. We frame each other physically rather than photographically. I was very uncomfortable, but it was also so liberating. Savor. I was living with my husband Mark and our daughters in Buenos Aires one summer. Together we make my first quasi-narrative inspired by the short story End of the Game by Julio Cortázar. In this film, 4 girls, our 2 daughters and 2 Argentine girls, explore their own early teen anticipations and disappointment. In this scene, I investigate something Cortázar called poses and attitudes. One of the girls interprets a series of words for very specific and quite mature emotions with her body. It was raining that day when I was shooting. We couldn't go outside, so I made do in the finding of a silhouette. Now, looking back, I really appreciate the way her body becomes a kind of semaphore for the concept she is just beginning to understand.
envidia, 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 caridad, 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 vergüenza, 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 miedo, 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 rencor, 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 celos, 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 generosidad, 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 piedad, 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 sacrificio, 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 renunciamiento, 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 desaliento, 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 desengaño, 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 latrocinio, 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 horror, horror, horror.
Savor. I just wanted to spend time with these women, Carolee Schneemann, Barbara Hammer, and Gunvor Nelson, all dear friends, people I admired. I share the Barbara experience here with you now.
I like to use my body in performance, either with a camera or without a camera, but moving on a trapeze, hiking, performing in my space with my furniture and my cameras, or using a movie, and it goes all the way back to 1968, 67, when I had an 8mm and a Super 8, and I would film myself in the woods. It caught the activity and the energy that is part of my personality. Using a moving camera expresses who I am, and to have a camera that I can be fluid with, that I can hold in my hand, it can be as changeable as my identity can be. Someone gave me a Super 8 camera, and I decided I should go to school and learn how to be a filmmaker. So I drove my motorcycle to Sonoma State, but on the way, I saw this little house in Bodega that was covered with red ivy. And I parked my motor scooter, or cycle it was at the time, and I went inside the house. And I saw through these cobwebbed windows all this beautiful display of red leaves. And in my pocket, I had asked my optometrist for any old lenses he had, and he had bifocal lenses. And I took them out and put them in front of the lens when I was shooting so I could see in two different ways. So I would shoot a little and then pull it away, so it would go from blurry to clear. Sometimes you'd see a line in the middle like you see in bifocals. And this was a perfect way to express myself. I felt interiorly then, just through experimenting, that I found out how I could make the inside of myself show on the outside. This film became skitsy because I was living in a man's world and I was a woman. And I felt like I had two different roles that I needed to play. I could be the assertive, I used the name Aggressa at the time, or I could be feminine Barbara and, you know, make my way in the world if that's what was called for.
Savor. I film my daughter at 3 distinct times in her life. She propels herself in the same direction as time, forward, on celluloid at 24 frames per second. I celebrate irreverence and disregard for the rules of the film industry, for the rules of the state, for the rules of decorum, for the rules of narrative.
Let us take the next example.
I was really angry at the time. I noticed that our bodies were being divided into sexual and functional territories, the body of the body and the body of the mind. I was writing a lot about this in my journal and trying to figure out a way to talk about it in my films.
That of a born thief. Louis C. Magnan writes of her, aged 9, was the daughter of a mad father, always in contention of sexual excitement. She was of weak intelligence. Her instincts had always been bad. Her conduct troubled, and her mind incapable of control. At 3, she was a thief and laid hands on her mother's money. At 5, she was interested in coming to the police office. She shrieked, tore off her socks,
These girls are both aged 10.
Threw her dolls into
Now
the
11.
gutter, lifted
12.
her shirts in
13.
the street. But
14.
looking at her
15.
photograph,
At 16, one is physically mature.
That
The other still has years to grow.
through only 9 years old, she offers the exact type of the born.
I asked the girl to tap dance for me. She refused and ran away. I asked another girl to read an insidious anthropological text. She made mistakes. At first, it felt like both of them were letting me down. I had failed, but both of their gestures morphed into forms of radical engagement.
Her jaws and cheekbones are incense for the frontal strong, the nose flat. She looks like a grown woman, nay, a man.
On May 17, 1968, 9 Vietnam War protesters, including a nurse, an artist, and 3 priests, walked into a draft board office, grabbed hundreds of records, and burned them with homemade napalm. This is my interpretation of the Catonsville Nine, a band of nonviolent resistors who broke the law in a defiant, poetic act. For 3 years, I was immersed in their lives, attending trials, visiting federal prisons, riding trains, eating dinner in homes, pondering when and where it's time to break the law for something you care about.
by the time the Catonsville 9 action happened, they switched from blood to fire.
We're all part of this.
The idea of jail doesn't bother me that much. The idea of cooperating with the federal government in any way at all irritates the hell out of me. My alternatives are to go to jail, go above ground with an assumed identity, stay underground, or leave the country. Anyway I choose, the government is choosing for me. But what we're questioning is their right. And they lost that right because of the obscenity and the insanity of their actions, which are growing more and more obscene and insane.
The U.S. Supreme Court ended a woman's constitutional right to bodily autonomy. So I went to Tennessee, the state where I grew up, one of 21 states where abortion clinics were closing their doors. I worked with 14 activists who performed with their backs to the camera. Then I talked to an obstetrician and gynecologist and a driver who takes pregnant women who want abortions across state lines.
What changed is that women in the state of Tennessee went back years in terms of us being able to care for the women in this state as equal right carrying members of the state. If I can't make the same medical decisions about my body with autonomy, I'm a second-class citizen. And you basically, as a physician, had to start counseling your patients from a legal perspective and not a medical perspective. In Tennessee, there is no exception for rape, and the exceptions for the life of the mother are so narrow, they may as well not exist. Doctors are afraid to perform these abortions. So that pregnancy is looked at as a happy, blissful ending for you. There's no consideration given to mom's feelings, mom's emotion, her mental health. You will be pregnant, you will be a parent, you will be happy about this pregnancy. I don't know if I see the patient anymore who openly discloses that she's not excited about her pregnancy, because she's now in an environment where you're expected to be excited. So it's more about me reading her body language and giving her the floor. It's okay if you're not happy. It's okay if you're scared. It's okay if you want to be a parent. It's okay if you don't.
Our tongue explores the space of our mouths. This is the room where we live, the place where words are formed, where food is tasted, and where ideas are shaped. Tonight, I shared my process of eating and digesting my life through my movie making.
Aww.
I'll keep it on. I wanted to thank Mary Rose McLean. She's right there. Woo! Thank you very much. You did a lot tonight.
All right, so maybe one more round of applause. So we do have time for some questions. I might just get us started, and then we do have mics on both sides. We are recording this. So if you do have a question, just wait for the mic to come to you, also so everyone can hear you. So first, thank you. This was beautiful and, so kind of thoughtful and delicate how you're thinking through things that are really thorny. I think one thing that's so wonderful about what you just did is you kind of let us into all the kind of gnarly stuff that as filmmakers we have to work through. And, something that I think is also really amazing in your films as well is that they, it's not like you make a film and you're like, okay, here's the answer. It's like the films themselves are also thinking through and thinking over things. And I guess, the thing that I'm wondering about now is, for this, you really use this kind of metaphor of metabolizing and eating. We've got the choke, the chew, the savor, and spit.
Good.
I got that, yeah. And I was sort of wondering how you came to those as a way to help us, think about your body of work and how that for you felt like the kind of right set of words for us.
I did that with my partner, Hudson Mark Street, in December. And we were on a long drive, and I said, I'm going to just throw out words. I know there are some words that are going to work for this. But I kept coming back to the mouth because I think that most of us process a lot of things by when we eat and when we don't and how we eat and when we say our art is our life, we sort of forget that there's that time where we eat to satisfy ourselves, or we have hunger, but then we also have this yearning to figure out some strategy around editing, and that it's all kind of mixed up, and that it's, I guess I'm thinking about a year of notes and numbers, and that was a really important time for me because it was probably the time in my life when I was most focused on trying to control things around my body, and that had to do with glucose. And I was really having a hard time with being intentional about food. I could not, of course everyone's dieted, but to be so focused on, I can't eat that and I can't eat that, it was like making films, but it was harder. And so I guess it was kind of a moment of revelation, because usually we eat kind of by default, and so all of that processing that goes on in the mouth started to connect with my head too. It is all the head anyway.
It's like a mind-body synthesis that
Yes.
you've given us. Are there other questions from folks in the audience? Okay, we might have to do a kind of collaborative passing of the mic.
As always, just absolutely, I don't even know what the word is, because everything that the more I know and see of you, the more surprised I am, the more unveiling and revealing I feel. And with this, I'm seeing a lot of consistency, and persistence is like the closest words that I can find for tonight. But I'm curious to know in your practice what you think is the least consistent aspect of your practice.
Ooh. Wow, that's a twist.
Okay.
I'm gonna have fun with this one. Let me think. Or I'm gonna be honest, or it'll be feeling vulnerable. The least consistent. Well, I'll say tonight, I kind of looked at the films that I showed and I thought, they are about persistence. They are about like that search for an idea. But maybe I could have been more playful sometimes. And, you know, I actually love doing that. And you know, with the Carolee, Barbara, and Denver, I was playing a lot. But I probably would, I'm not looking to relax. That's not it. But to be like even looser would be like a positive thing. So I kind of stepped out of myself here and I thought, loosen up a little bit. But that question came from Jack Waters, who presented the experimental lecture with Peter Cramer, who's here too, a few years ago, and it was explosive, and I loved it. And so that makes me think, and I thank you for asking what I maybe could explore a bit more. I don't want to say improve. That sounds intentional. You can't be intentionally like loose.
Other questions? Yeah, I can just hand you my
Hey Lynn, that was so fabulous, inventive, amazing. My question has to do with writing, and I know that you also call yourself a poet and you write poetry, and that you actually wrote a whole piece tonight, and what I found interesting is that you edited through writing the images tonight. So I wondered about that relationship overall in your work, or if you could just talk about that.
Yeah. Actually, I spent a couple of months working on this. It was sort of like making a film. And actually, the some of the times where I was in the back and you all were in darkness thrilled me to be. Oh my God! My voice is filling the room. I asked for this microphone, and according to Jessica, the university bought it. Maybe they'll let me.
You got
it, you! The only time I've ever used a microphone like this was when I was shooting film about a father who over 35 years, and I didn't have one like this. It wasn't like a TED Talk type of thing, but I had a wireless mic. On my, I'm going to come back to the writing, but I have to say this. I had a wireless mic on my dad, and you know, I mentioned there are a lot of things about my dad that were kind of hidden. But then he was wearing the wireless microphone all the time, so I could hear his telephone conversations and everything. And he kind of knew, but he kind of was oblivious to it. But I'll say something about writing that is part of filmmaking, even if you're working with other people's voices. Filmmaking is a lot about listening, and so is playwriting, and I learned a lot about playwriting when I was making the Washing Society, because it started as a live performance, and we were using verbatim text and then turning it into the play. Same with Your Day Is My Night. So I write from an internal place, but I also write from listening. And so that's why I think the acknowledgement that working with like around a documentary process is writing also, because you're attuned to language. And I love a film where people speak and then they contradict themselves, or well, I'll tell you something I love is a lecture where someone doesn't know what to say. And then you're just sitting there and you're actually seeing them write in their head. They're quickly writing what they're going to say. And that, so active thinking is exhilarating to me. That's why I like doing interviews and seeing what will happen. But there was another kind of writing that went on with Your Day Is My Night, which was that I turned those interviews into a play, and then we were writing in another spirit, another kind of discourse, and we were writing together, and that usually isn't what happens, that writing is collaborative. So it was like very energizing to me. So I have different modes of writing. And when I was making the House of Science, my brother and sister, who are both here tonight, can tell you about this. I was really flabbergasted and didn't know how to finish the film. And I'd been keeping a journal, but I had no idea that the journal I was keeping was actually kind of the core of the film. So I also think you don't write to something, you write in parallel. That sounds like Trin Minh Ha, and she was definitely an inspiration to me. So all of those ways of writing are exciting to me. So I just enjoy that practice. What I don't really like, but maybe I'll learn one day, is I don't really like writing a story-based script. And then applying that to my filmmaking. But maybe I'll do it one day.
I think I see a hand back there.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you, sister. A lot of the work, as you see it all in one sort of evening, has to do with the passing of time. And both within like literal watching your daughter change times, but also the use of the photograph and what the photograph speaks in terms of its content, but also in terms of its quality and the sort of texture of the photograph. I was thinking about you making this film in Memphis, Sermons and Sacred Pictures, when you were in your 20s, I guess, and then now in your 60s, making a film like Contractions. And I'm wondering what those two films, which was also in Memphis, what they say to you about passing of time and how they were different experiences for you.
Good question, Ira. Yeah, you know, I'm fascinated by this expression that we use, which is called hometown. It's kind of colloquial, it's kind of endearing when people say, oh, my hometown. And then, you know, sometimes people don't really reference a place as hometown because they move so much, so they don't have that vortex around a place. But it is true that I kind of framed this with two different films that I shot in that location that has such a visceral presence in my consciousness. It wasn't an arty town. It was not a happy town for the most part. I'm not saying I didn't have a happy childhood, but there was a lot of tension. I made a film we didn't see tonight called Tip of My Tongue, where I talk about what it was like to live in Memphis in 1968 when, you know, there were curfews and Martin Luther King was killed. There was just so much. So I'm fascinated by the way that specific archival footage, like you see in Sermon and Sacred Pictures, takes you to a space actually that looks kind of happy, because Reverend Taylor photographed his black community doing the things they wanted to do, but there were plenty of things they did that they didn't want to do, and he didn't film those. So the opening of the first Black Assurance Company, or the opening, or traveling to a Baptist convention, or a baptism, all those things were things that he felt really happy about and celebrated. But then, you know, like really almost 90 years later, when if you think about it, when I went to Memphis to shoot Contractions, and I'm going to say it this way, when I went to shoot with a DSLR camera digitally, it's a different kind of precision. So you think, okay, a digital camera, you're going to see more detail, and that will be more of a witnessing of the time of what it was like to be in Memphis. But then, because of the laws in Tennessee, it was too dangerous for the women who were in the film to show their faces. So it becomes another register of a historical time. not the time of the filmmaking, but in a broader time. So thanks for making me think about that.
Thanks so much. It was really a pleasure. I would just like to hear you speak more about your kind of ongoing collaborations. And I really liked that East Side of Salina, which you sent me a link to. I really appreciated it. And you know, so your ongoing collaborations and making work with other people, but also your the way you work with children, which was, you know, really sweet. I really appreciated it. Thank you.
Maybe I'll talk about children first. 2 of them are here. My daughters are here. But I want to say something about I really like to work with children because they surprise you and because they don't know what's expected, and they deliver in a challenging way. And I became, I'll say, enamored by working with children, not because of home movies, but because I watched as much of Jean-Luc Godard's France Tour des Enfants, and I love that. It was a television series that he made, that he did. He made television in the 80s, early 80s, I think, in which he asked these really broad, kind of pretentious, but in a good way, questions about time and philosophy and love to these 2 kids, and there were a lot of lulls, and there was a lot of fight back, but then it was just so beautiful and mysterious and not overworked, and so that seeing those videos by Godard, who's been a very important person in my practice, like I really have turned to his work so often to try to figure out strategies, I guess I would say, made me believe that it was an important kind of like epistemological thing to do. If you wanted to know how you know something, you need to know when you don't know, and when you're still searching, or when you don't have the right language and you don't recognize your flaws. So that's about children. And then, and children like to play, I'll say too, like in Wind in Our Hair. And then collaborations, probably every film I've ever made is a collaboration, because I don't really work with the traditional hierarchies, and I love when people who started out in front of the camera end up behind the camera, and we kind of consult each other, and it's scary to ask everybody, hey, how do you think this is going? But I tend to do it, and I tend to also really stay in touch with people. That's why it was upsetting that I am not in touch with Cherie Wallace, so I brought it up. I kind of wanted us to be more collaborative. That's why I thought I'd finish shooting the film biography of Lilith. Then I went back to Florida. I had been living in Florida and teaching, and then moved away, and then went back to ask her questions about her life. And we were getting closer in that fake way that sometimes you think you have in film. And she came up here to the Millennium Film Workshop on East 4th Street, and then that guy wrote the review. And I don't know if I was stupid to show, I don't remember whether I intentionally showed it to her or she just saw, I mean, you're so excited someone wrote a review, and maybe she asked me. Anyway, she saw it and she was so infuriated. So it was kind of a collaborative effort that didn't work out in a way. And I was cautious about showing the film for a long time. But working with Lizzie Olesker, the playwright, we've been working for 10 years. We made live performances called Every Fold Matters and laundromats around New York. And then we made the Washing Society, and actually we're finishing a book together that's going to come out this year, I think, called Handbook, a Manual on Performance, Process, and the Labor of Laundry. And so that's been a really, really nourishing, generative, as people say, and fun, and equally committed collaboration.
Lynne, I was thinking when I was watching all the different films that you don't miss any opportunities. Like, all of them have so much in them. Like, you had sound and so many kinds of sound, and you're writing, and there's so much packed into even 4 minutes. And so that's kind of a consistent thing that I see over all the films. But I'm wondering, because you put so much and you seem to not want to miss any opportunity, how do you know when you're finished?
I want to add, that's my sister, Dana. I think we all wonder when we are finished. And the thing is that, oh my goodness, most people who are making movies, well, I say I'm finished when I can call a film a movie. And I really mean it. A movie is something I share. A movie is something that could be in a theater. A film, I do say film, but a film is a film for a long time. But that sounds kind of glib. And I want to also say that, like many people in this room, we don't think that it's only grown up because it's over 73 minutes and is therefore a feature. I really am committed to something being the length that it needs to be, and or could be. It can be a 3-minute silent film, like A Month of Single Frame. I mean, not A Month of Single Frame. That's a movie I didn't show tonight. Sorry, but like A Year of Notes and Numbers. You know, that's just not the numbers from my health reports and notes to myself, which I still write on those particular kind of Post-its. And so there's a funny thing that we think that we need to add sound, but I really love the sound of a room with a group of people. I love the ums and ahs and the snoring and sometimes, and you know, all the things that happen in the room that remind us that we're alive together. So I guess it's the hardest one to figure out, as you could imagine, was film about a father who. And one of the things that happened in the making of that film was that in going back to material that I thought was really terrible and had decayed too much, that, and like the shot I showed today, the decay felt very physical and right. And so sometimes it saddens me that digital material is the same today as it was 3 weeks ago, or, you know, even after the rain, but you know, it doesn't live with us in a biological way. So it's different. And so once you can recognize the decay as being interesting and alchemical and all of that, then then those things come back and are compelling.
I think go back there, and then we'll go here.
Hi, Lynne. I hope I asked this question right. I noticed during spitting, that was the one time that you went to the back to face the screen and cast your own shadow on it. And I was wondering if you're making a statement about spitting at the screen, receiving the spit, being the receiver of the spit. What was going on?
Oh my gosh, I'm glad you're so etymological. Really? I thought about spitting as kind of like a great rude thing to do. There's a place in House of Science where a woman talks about the fact that her mother made her swallow her spit or swallow the snot in her body, and you know, women swallow a lot of things, and and I mean, I could say, how many of you have swallowed because you didn't want to blow your nose or spit? Men do it too, I guess. So I thought of that film as kind of a spit back at society and things. But I also thought of it being a film, that film, and then especially the last two films, as like a fuck you to society, you know, the Caton's film. I mean, I decided to show Investigation of a Flame now because I'm thinking about the last few weeks in which we've lived, and I was thinking about, you know, what will we do? How will we speak to power? And I thought about what they did, and they did they spit, and they did more, and then they went to jail for it, all of them, and it's just interesting to think about what civil disobedience can mean today. So that was kind of my idea about spit, and then I stood up there because I wanted to break our way of looking at film a bit. I wanted to recognize there's a long tradition of performance with film where we, you know, we take that projection and we sculpt it. Maybe I mean that could be enough. That's a way of disrupting. So people don't have to disrupt by breaking the law. They don't have to disrupt, you know, around gender unless that's meaningful to them. That's like super interesting to me, but maybe, you know, I don't think people should feel they have to do something because, you know, they're artists or writer, you know, these are just things that are moving to me, both the people I've worked with. You know, it's quite moving when you decide to make a project that allows you to, for example, spend 3 years with the Catonsville 9, decades afterwards, you know, especially Daniel Berrigan, the priest, who's probably not, I don't know how many people know, but he's a very renowned poet. He's died now, but he died in his 90s, but to spend that long with him and traveling with him came out of working with the film. So he was he wasn't a spitter really, but he was like absolutely dignified, but actually so grounded and always spoke his mind. Yeah.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Oh, can I say one thing? Yeah. So I brought a few things with me that are kind of like giveaways. Yeah, because I have boxes and boxes of DVDs. And I like DVDs, but I know some of you don't. But if you do like DVDs and you want one, not just as a paperweight, but, you know, like to use in some other way, I brought them here. And I also wanted to say that on your program, you can take a DVD, by the way, they're over there. On your program, I listed what the Vimeo calls, Vimeo is the streaming service most of us use with our work. I created a showcase, they call it, with all of these films, which I'll keep up for a while, maybe a year or so. And so you can watch all of these films in their entirety if you feel like it. But I just wanted to say how much I appreciate Jessica. Jessica, I want to there are three people here, Jessica, Vito, and for a really, really long time, Daryl Wilson. So I would like him to stand up. Daryl! Say that experimental film is really a teeny part, or experimental or non-traditional documentary, very small part of our culture. But we love it, and we do it because we can't imagine doing anything else. And Daryl does that here as an artist and an extremely inspiring teacher. I mean, I was here 13 years, and the number of people who said that this man changed their life was unbelievable. So I just want to say, like, really a big applause to you, Daryl. You go, one more question. So.
We can take one more question. I think we have one here.
There was one there too. I don't want to take away. Do you still want to ask your question?
No, I'm family, and I'm in a corner hurl.
Okay.
Thank you so much for
You're welcome.
presenting today. It's good to see you 2 times in a week, which I feel very flattered for.
Thank you.
Thank you. You had came into our class, and one sentence that really struck me was that you sometimes choose a title before you make a film, which I love because you kind of choose the statement and then, or the answer and then find the question, I guess is a good way to put it. So I was kind of wondering within the form of this, since you said it's kind of a film within itself, this lecture, if you chose the title first or the content. And then the second part of
Wait,
the
can I
question.
answer that?
Yes.
I chose the title first. The title. Oh my God, that's so funny. Well, there are 2 reasons. One was practical because Jessica needed the title. But I wanted to, well, actually Jack, thank you. Jack Waters was asking about play. So I wanted to have a little fun with it before I got down to the nitty gritty. But I worked really closely with Mary Rose on the rhythm of the whole thing. And so yeah, the title came first. And then then I had to figure out the categories and what fit into what. And I had no idea that most of my films are choke films. And actually, I have very few that are Savor, and so it was weird. I didn't know that, but it was true.
Final question of the question I already asked is if you had to make it choke, chew, savor, spit, and what would be your last word?
Oh, God.
Maybe it's like your future section of films that you create. I don't know. What would be that last word?
She really
pressure is like on right here, right
It's
now.
on. Okay. Fly.
Fly?
Yeah.
Okay.
On that note, so you want